Welcome back to Open Line. We are talking with Metro Councilman at Large Jim Schulman about the emotional issue, short-term rentals, Airbnb. A lot of calls, a lot of comments on Facebook. We're streaming this live on our News Channel 5 Facebook page. Let's go to Cindy. Cindy, hello.
Hello. Yes, I was just wondering why they do not enforce the people that own these Airbnbs that they have to stay in the home at least 6 months out of the year, and then on the high season where they could rent them out, do it that way. Because I have a man that I take care of in the neighborhood, and there's 3 on his street. 2 are right next door to each other, and 1 is across the street. And they are renting these out just like every weekend. You see cleaning people over at least twice a week, cleaning them up to re-rent out and everything. And my understanding is they have to be in the house a percentage of the time to be in compliance with all of this, and they're not. And, you know, the traffic on the streets, and the little man I take care of is handicapped, and we have to sometimes pull a car all the way up to the curb to get him, you know, past his mailbox to get him loaded in the car, that they've had to put no parking signs out in front of his house to be able to get him even loaded in the vehicle to take him to a doctor or an appointment.
All right, well, let's talk about that, the issue of, I believe, the issue of non-owner occupied versus occupied.
Yeah, so she's kind of, the non-owner occupied, she may not be running into. That sounds like an owner occupied. I'm not sure about that 6-month provision because we've been dealing just with the non-owner occupied. But what she's talking about is exactly what a lot of the neighbors are running into, and that is, first of all, you know, are they owner occupied or are they not owner occupied? Is somebody actually living in the house? And how do you determine whether somebody's living in the house or not? Because if you say it's an owner occupied, then you can get a permit for type 1s. The concern we've got are the non-owner occupied. But what she's also talking about is the traffic, you know, trying to get through it all, trying to figure out what's going on. A lot of people are concerned that there's lots of different people that show up every weekend. That's a concern. And that's part of what enforcement has to happen. So if you're not allowed to block streets, or if there's, you know, everybody's parked in the front yard and nobody can get around, that's you know, that can be a codes violation, and we could get somebody in there to take care of it.
On Facebook, just a vigorous discussion. You can't restrict long-term renters, so why would you discriminate against short-term renters? That's Greg Garner. Others with the other side. So we're getting, on both sides, we're seeing lots of comments. Let's go to the phones here. Let's go to Lucy. Hello, Lucy.
Hey, y'all.
Hi. What's on your mind?
Well, Mr. Schulman, I appreciate how you've explained this so far. Now, I know Mr. Hall's probably already got his fingernails dug into his desk, because I'm getting ready to probably sound a little crazier than your comments on Facebook and your callers that have called in. I just want to say something that I'm going to try to have some foresight into the future with all of this on these non-owner Airbnbs that you're talking about. You know, you can go and shutter somebody's house and take their property away for selling heroin in it and call it a public nuisance, okay? Like the lady said about the businesses in your homes, that you can't do that in Metro. You used to be able to do it because nobody bothered their neighbors when they did that. But you can sell heroin and they can take your home away, not because it's a drug you're selling. It's just too much traffic in the neighborhood from people that don't live there. And sociologists know this, that when you're not at home, when you're not in your neighborhood, you act like a fool. When people rush to an area where they're building a lot of stuff and they're there temporarily, and the population is exploding where they're building the new projects and whatnot, incest rates go up. So that shows you how people act when mom and daddy aren't around. But what I want to talk about is the corporations have been given citizenship status, Bill of Rights, by Citizens United. These corporations now have gone into the housing monopoly building. They're starting to buy up a lot of houses in Columbia. They're coming this way because there's rumors that Google's coming to Clarksville someday. But they're coming this way. So they have a lot of money as a quote-unquote individual citizens, and they're going to ramrod this over everybody. Who's to say?
So what you're talking about, Lucy, is that corporations are buying these houses, not individuals.
Right, and down the road, who's to say that in your neighborhood they're going to have that turned into now a boutique hotel, because not only do they have a vote, but they got money to push on these councilmen.
All right, well, let's talk about all that. Lucy, thank you. I've heard Lucy be concerned about this in the past. Corporations coming and buying up houses.
Yeah.
That it's not just some, mom and pop, owner who owns one of these. It's somebody who owns many of them. A corporation.
That's right.
What do you say about all that?
So Lucy's correct. That's a concern. So when we were discussing it in the ad hoc committee, one of the things that came up was about limiting ownership to just natural persons. So corporations, LLC, those things under the resolution bill would actually stop that from happening. Now, you got to have enforcement. Lucy's right on. The callers have been right in the stuff on Facebook. You got to have enforcement. Look how big this city is, and there's a lot of these things out there. So one of the ideas about limiting, putting the majority of them in a certain area downtown was that if you have an enforcement thing, they don't have to be running all over the county on a Saturday night looking for these things. Most of the problems are going to be right downtown or in that area, and then go check on them. But Lucy's got a valid point, and our bill has something in there to try to stop what she's talking about.
We have a comment or question here on Facebook. What are other cities doing? Look at the West Coast. What is happening in the West Coast? What have you learned?
Very valid point. So there are a number of cities across the country that have banned non-owner occupied. Okay, so we know that. The circumstances here are a little different. We have a very vibrant city. We have a lot of tourists. We don't have as many hotel rooms as we may have in the near future. So I think Airbnb looks at this HomeAway as a place that is a good for them to try to push this issue. So in other places there have been fights. Council members have fought over it. City commissions have fought over it. There have been lawsuits, all that other stuff. In a number of cities, they have actually been able to say no non-owner occupied. So that's why I think we have 608, the bill that says we're going to phase them out over 3 years in the residential zones.
In those cities, presumably the legislature didn't come in that state.
That's what's a little different here, is that we have a legislature that could come in and say no. So again, understand that. I've heard that lots of things, but we're trying to look at the realities of the situation, and we're trying to come up with something that we think will hold it together for the council. The legislature won't pass any type of measures, and that we can enforce, which is again the council responsibility. This is our responsibility, but if we depends on what happened, we may lose that responsibility, and then our hands are tied for a while.
Let's go to Lee. Hello,
Okay.
Lee.
Yes.
Online. Go right ahead. What's on your mind?
I want to come down on the side of people who oppose these Airbnbs. I live in East Nashville, and we have enough parking problems. On my block, a restaurant moved in, and that caused all kinds of parking problems. On the other end of the street, we have an Airbnb that has not caused a lot of problems yet, but it doesn't appear to be a party house or anything. But I don't live right next to that house, but parking over here is really tough. Cars parked on both sides of the street, and another problem is another problem too many, and I can foresee that becoming a big problem with especially if it's a party house.
Right.
And enforcement is, Councilman Sherman's right, enforcement, you have to have it. We had to have our block designated as residential permit parking only in order to deal with the restaurant people trying to park up and down in front of our homes. And then we had to fight with the police to make them actually come over here and write tickets.
All right, well, let's talk about all that. Enforcement, parking issues. What do you want to say to all that?
That was Lee, right?
Right.
From East Nashville. So he's got a valid point. I mean, we know that there are issues out there. Now, the residential parking permits, it sounds like what they did was they figured out a way to kind of limit other people from coming in and blocking their streets or taking up all the parking spots. Good for him. I mean, and good for the neighborhood. We want to keep working through this. Again, that's one of the reasons why the council should continue to have its power to keep trying to work this thing out. Now, I don't want to piecemeal this bill to death. What I want to do is keep working through it to make sure we deal with issues like that. Now, the last point he made, which was very good, was you got to have somebody come in and enforce. Okay, so he's got residential parking permits on his street, but if nobody's going to come and do any of this,
right,
then we're not going to get anywhere. We have to have enforcement.
And part of also what he's talking about are the party houses. What you're addressing there is the 3 strikes you're out, lowering it to 2 strikes you're out. There has to be the enforcement there too.
Right. If you have some wild party and they're violating the noise ordinance, the police, are called. That's a police issue that they've got to do. But obviously, Nashville has got a lot of issues going on. We've got crime going on, and personally, I want the police dealing with the serious crime issues. This is an issue, but we've had the police come in and talk to the committee, and they will tell you that the noise stuff goes low on the priority list.
Sure.
Trying to keep our citizens safe is up at the top, and got to deal with that.
We're going to take a break. We'll come back. If you want to call, there's the number 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We're also monitoring the comments on Facebook. If you want to comment, we will potentially read the comment on our Facebook Live feed. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.